Today we're doing an overall case study of the Poplar Fork watershed. Poplar Fork is located in Putnam County in the Lower Kanawha watershed. It's a tributary to Hurricane Creek, which then leads to the Kanawha River, and then finally the Ohio River, which will lead out of West Virginia. And Poplar Fork's headwaters are just south of Taze Valley. The land uses in the Lower Kanawha watershed are primarily forest. About 3/4 of the land is forest. The remainder is either urban and residential or grasslands or agriculture. Less than 1/10% of the land is used for mining. Along the Poplar Fork watershed, you mostly see urban or residential land or forests. In the figure to the right, you'll see highlighted in red the entirety of Poplar Fork, which then connects to Hurricane Creek and finally the Kanawha River. Poplar Fork is designated as Category A by the WVDEP, which means it's a public water supply and the water is treated for human consumption, or can be, and currently is in Poplar Fork. All parameters in the water quality standards written by the WVDEP with a limit stated for Category A have to be followed for Poplar Fork. And the main concerns in most public water supply streams are iron, pH, dissolved oxygen, selenium, and fecal coliform. Poplar Fork is 303D listed for its entire length for the parameters of iron, fecal coliform levels, and biological conditions not allowable. A TMDL has been created for Poplar Fork, and the data used for that involved individual waste load allocations by point source contributions and discharge reports from NPDES permit holding businesses and residences, along with load allocations from non-point source contributions calculated by advanced modeling techniques and from water quality studies and field sampling. Biological stressor studies were also conducted to calculate the TMDL, and it was determined that the iron and fecal coliform levels were involved in creating the biological stressors in this stream. Organic enrichment and sedimentation were the main stressors, and this was determined by the WVDEP in water quality studies. TMDLs for iron and fecal coliform have been made on Poplar Creek, and they're calculated by the sum of waste load allocations from our point sources plus the sum of our load allocations from our non-point sources plus a margin of safety. The margin of safety is to accommodate low flow conditions, spills, combined sewer overflows, and runoff from excessive precipitation events and flooding. All of this is calculated using the mining data analysis system formed by the WVDEP. The mining data analysis system calculates TMDLs all across West Virginia, taking into account watershed hydrology, source contributions, pollutant transport routes, runoff from natural and man-made sources, along with disturbance activity in the watershed, such as from construction projects and deforestation. The total maximum daily load calculated for Poplar Fork was determined to be 122.7 pounds of iron per day, and the fecal coliform TMDL was calculated to be 1.12 times 10 to the 11th counts of fecal coliform per 100 milliliters of water per day. The recommendations to reach these were to restrict new and reissued permits to be within these new limits. For iron, the limit included space for construction stormwater permits, and no space was made for future dischargers outside of these construction stormwater permits. For fecal coliform, they are restricting new and reissued permits to reach the appropriate limits also. And the surrounding towns are trying to provide sewer service to unserviced sewer areas, adding them into the public network, which will lower fecal coliform from runoff from these areas and from untreated discharge that these residencies may be illegally discharging into the waters. There was no biological TMDL formed. Uh, the TMDL technical report explains that by lowering iron and fecal coliform levels to these TMDL recommendations should alleviate the biological stressors that are currently happening, and there should no longer be any biological conditions not allowable if we fix the iron and fecal coliform levels. The overall watershed health isn't too great on Poplar Fork. The recommended water quality standards by the WVDEP are 1.5 milligrams of iron per liter of water and 200 counts of fecal coliform per 100 milliliters of water in a monthly average of counts. And a whiskey score is an overall taxonomy of benthic macroinvertebrates that come out to a score of 78 to 100 is comparable to really good reference sites, really healthy streams in West Virginia. 68 to 78 is comparable to below average sites in West Virginia, and less than 68 is much worse than the reference sites that we want in West Virginia. The latest data available for the Poplar Fork watershed via the WVDEP is from June 2008, where 4 sampling sites were tested. The iron levels at all 4 sites were below the WVDEP water quality standards, but 2 of the 4 sites for fecal coliform were way higher than allowed, and 1 of them was just slightly above. But watershed health isn't looking too great, obviously, but it is improving. The water is able to be treated for human consumption currently. Putnam PSD is a water treatment plant that uses the water from Poplar Fork, and its consumer confidence reports don't report any of these things coming out in excessive amounts. But it could use improvement by following these TMDL recommendations, maybe by bringing more rural residences into the public sewer network, or restricting and hawking them on illegal discharges of their raw waste and sewage back into the water system. The site does lack any whiskey scores, but if the iron is improving, that means the sedimentation is most likely improving, but there still may be an organic enrichment problem here. There are currently 3 active iron discharge NPDES permits in the Poplar Fork watershed, and 6 fecal coliform NPDES permits currently active. The 3 iron discharge permits are at a water treatment plant, a gas station, and a groundwater remediation site that was once a gas station. All of the fecal coliform discharge sites are residential homes for home aeration units. A home aeration unit is like in this picture above. It is pretty much a septic system, but above ground, and after treating, the waste can be discharged into the stream. Even though there aren't many NPDES permits on Poplar Fork, there are a variety of permit types. The water treatment plant is its own special kind of permit, while the groundwater remediation site is also one. The active gas station has a stormwater general permit, and the residential sites are labeled as sewage plants producing under 50,000 gallons per day or processing under 50,000 gallons per day of raw sewage. And all 4 of these types of permits require quarterly testing and reports. There have been some violations of these permits in recent years on Poplar Fork, specifically at Putnam PSD, the water treatment plant. From October 2017 to June 2018, they failed to report any DMRs for 3 whole quarters, and they had some notice of violations for that, and possibly could have been charged thousands of dollars. They also had a condition not allowable for total recoverable aluminum according to Clean Water Act standards in 2017, and they broke the lead and copper rule of the Safe Drinking Water Act in the same quarter of 2017.